All right, everyone. Good evening. It is another episode of the Grayed Out Podcast. I'm Jay the Gray, and I am here with you tonight, and I hope you are ready to be grayed out. Where do I start? Well, how about this? Let's start with just a little bit of transparency. This is a redo. Last night I got on, recorded, did a Facebook Live, and did a long video about the same subject. But unfortunately, I was in a very emotional state. Went a couple different directions, ended up down a couple rabbit holes at the end. And if you want it, you can go ahead onto the Grayed Out page on Facebook. Just look Grayed Out Podcast on Facebook. The live video is up there. I didn't take it down because I was like, well, whatever. It happened. But I didn't want to just throw that up as I wanted to do better. And I realized I could. So there are lots of things to cover that I will cover that kind of I got off into the weeds about. So all that to say, here's where we are tonight. From last Monday to yesterday to today, it has been a crazy week. It has been a crazy week. And I'm going to start off by saying I realize right now what I'm diving into in this episode is a sensitive subject. But I want to make sure to do both what I can to speak out against injustice when I see it, when it's out there, it needs to be spoken. I also want to make sure that I talk to people from both sides so that they can understand different perspectives. That's the entire mission that I realize, self-appointed. No one said, hey, you really should. But it's all that's always in my head and how things seem to work out, and they always end up being polarized. And my whole mission is to kind of talk to that space where, hey, the table's in the middle. And if you're standing on one side of the room and other people are on the other side of the room and that table is empty, nothing's getting solved. Nothing. So I'm going to sit down at the table. I'm going to say some things. But before I even really dive into this, I want to say something very clear. Because, if you haven't understood by now, we're dealing with a week where we saw an injustice, like a grave injustice last Monday when George Floyd was killed. And there's no other way to put it. He was killed. And it was an injustice, and it is horrible. It is awful. And there's just been a week of absolute outpourings of outrage, rage, anger, protest, riots, you name it. Obviously, this last week, you've had TV, cable, smoke signals, letters, I don't know. You're working on one of those, a teletype or some old Morse code, right? You get a telegraph machine going, dee-dee-dee-dee. Great. You'd still know that there's just been nothing but chaos around our country this last week. And a lot of people are speaking. And I realized my voice could just get lost in the noise, but I got to say something. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read this because I wrote this caveat for this episode, and I think it's imperative that I read it the way I wrote it. So I'm literally just going to I'm going to read it verbatim. I know that as a white man, this is going to generate mixed responses, and that some will think I have no business talking about this, and some will think I have no business staying silent. Some will say I have no real understanding, and hopefully I can offer some thoughts that may cause some people to think, some to understand, and some to heal. I feel like whatever the platform you have, small, large, medium-sized, whatever it is, we have an obligation to use any platform to speak out on behalf of those who are hurting, who need help, who need healing, to call out injustice, to walk in a world that clearly has issues and help to make it better. That's what we have to do. So whether this is heard by 10 people, 20 people, 200 people, I don't know. But I'm saying some things tonight that are just going to come real from the heart. And I realize I'm getting a redo, so I've had a really chance to rethink my words, but I promise you this, I'm sticking to the same narrative. And like I said, I left the other video up, so if you want to go balance that between this and see, then great. You're going to get pretty much the same thing. I'm just going to try and condense it down to less than, it was almost 55 minutes. So that's long. Tonight, this episode, not so much. But here's what happened. This last week, I started thinking a lot about all the people I know, the people that are around me, and it just had me checking in on people and some friends. And here's the deal. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, in the East Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area. So these is like home to cities like Oakland and Richmond and El Cerrito, El Sobrante, San Pablo, Rodeo, Hercules, my hometown of Pinole. Right? These are all East Bay towns. And the East Bay was a diverse blue-collar region growing up. And from the time I started school there to the time I graduated school there, and I went to first grade through 12th grade with the exception of a quarter of 6th grade and my 7th grade year, I went to school with the same people for the entirety of my school career, from first grade all the way to graduating high school. And so what I learned immediately was that I was in a mix of people that were of every stripe. I mean, you name it, we had it. And those people were our community, and they were our classmates and our friends, and they were who we played with and we spent time with, and we went to their houses, and that's just who we were. We were that community, a blended community, and no one questioned it. It was full of people of every race and ethnicity that I could think of when I was a kid, for sure, right? From whites, blacks, Hispanics, to Asians of many varieties. Like we had varieties of like different kinds of Hispanics. The Latino community was represented by people from South America, from Spain, from Mexico. We had people that were first generation, second generation. We had people all over the place. And it was awesome. Now, I'm going to say this. That does not mean that growing up that way, our community didn't have its struggles. We didn't have our struggles to get along. But I'm going to say this. For the most part, our struggles were never about one another's skin color or other things like that. It was like He-Man or Transformers or G.I. Joe or Inspector. Like what do you like? Who do you like? What comic books are better? Like what shows are better? What girls do you like? Like all the who had the best lunchbox? You know, when we were super little, those were the things we worried about, fought about, and that's just the way life was. The only incident I can super think of that happened as a community, like going to school, what happened actually while I was gone, and during my 7th grade year at the junior high, I would have been going to had I stayed home. I had to move in with my uncle for that school year. Had I stayed at the junior high that I was going to, there was kind of, I mean, people like the junior high kids call it a race riot, but it was a bunch of, kids who were metalheads with all of their denim and all this stuff. And then all the kids that listened to hip hop, and they had this big, like, giant fight. I don't even know that a fight actually happened. I wasn't there. It was all hearsay by the time I got back. It was like, if any of you that went to school with me see this, catch this, and you remember that from Pinole Junior High, 7th grade, right? The whole thing. Maybe you can like put something in the comments. I don't know. We don't need a bunch of details, but anyway. The struggles were real though. And here's where I'm going to just be very raw with you guys about who I was as a kid. And I'm going to tell you a story about a tragic mistake that I made, right, as a stupid kid. I was a kid who came from a kind of a messy home, and I don't need to get into all the details of that, but I was desperate for friendship, desperate for acceptance, desperate to be liked in any way possible. I just wanted the approval of my peers so badly and that haunted me for most of my school career, if I'm going to be honest. I just wanted to be the person that people wanted to be around. And I never realized that just being myself was going to be okay. In fact, I felt quite the opposite. And so I was willing to do a lot of things. And this incident I'm going to tell you about stems from that. We had in my school, so this happened probably either 2nd or 3rd grade. I cannot remember the exact year, 2nd or 3rd grade. So I was 8 or 9 years old. At school one morning, We were out on the play yard before school started. And in my school, even though we had this great mix, I remember one of the peculiar things about school growing up in grade school in the 70s, our special education classes were heavily attended by black students. And I think that there was a flaw, there was a lot of misunderstanding in just the education system back then. There were some issues, right? I just never quite understood it. But for the most part, the kids in that class were great. You know, everyone got along. Mostly. One morning, I was approached by a couple of guys that I hung out with somewhat regularly. And always trying to get their approval. I was a little follower. And they basically gave me a proposition. There was one kid in the special education class who was he was a bigger black kid, had a very prominent overbite. And they said that if I wanted to maintain their friendship and be accepted by them, what I needed to do was I needed to go confront this young man, this other boy, and call him a bucktooth N-word. I'm not even going to say it, right? But that's what if you want our approval, if you want our acceptance, we want you to walk over there, right? And just tell him he's a bucktooth N-word. And then, they egged me on, said I needed to do it to prove to them. And I bought it. And so I mustered up all the courage I had, because here's the thing. In my mind, immediately, I knew I was doing a wrong thing. I knew it was not right to say that. I knew it wasn't right to call people that. I knew it wasn't right that that's not how I felt. But I so desperately wanted these other kids' approvals that I walked over to this kid and I stood there and I pulled everything I could and I just started saying it to him. And I said it 3 or 4 times just so they could hear and make sure. And he just stood there kind of staring at me like, what on earth is going on? Where did this kid come from? Why is he saying this to me? And he just kind of stared at me, didn't know what to do. And I said it, and I turned around and run away, and there was a teacher right there who I don't know if she just came along and saw me, or she heard it, and she was like, that can't be what I hear. And she stood there, and the look on her face, and it said everything you needed to know. It said everything you needed. It was a look of disgust and anger and disbelief. It was just the most she was just shocked and angry. And she grabbed me up by the back of the neck and she took me to the principal's office. And it was the quickest I'd ever been drugged by an adult. It was whoa. Now, let me paint the picture for you of how this works. It's 19, I want to say, it might be 1980. Yeah, I guess it'd be 1980. So not 70s, sorry, 1980. And in 1980, and all through the 70s, if you went to elementary school, pretty much anywhere in this country, you know that corporal punishment was still a thing. Meaning your parents could sign a piece of paper, send it to the school, and the principal could whoop your butt, right? With the device of his choosing, normally. He wouldn't lay his hand on you. He had a paddle. And in my school, we had a principal. His name was Mr. Kelly. And Mr. Kelly was normally a very nice, pleasant man to be around, but he did not look like the kind of person that you wanted to have mad, because he was a rather thick-necked gentleman, right? Not heavy, not round. He was very, very triangularly upside-down shaped. He had very broad shoulders, a very thick neck, and very big arms. He could have been a linebacker back in the day. I don't know, but he was not to be trifled with. And here I am in his office. And the teacher begins to explain to Mr. Kelly what this moronic little kid had done. And she said, he says he was saying bucktooth, but I think maybe he was saying F you. And I was like, no. But it didn't matter. That didn't matter. I was so freaked out, scared, worried. And Mr. Kelly, the look of like disappointment, the look of anger, like it was just, he stood up. He was like, Justin, I can't believe you did this. Why on earth would you say something like that to this young man? Why on earth would you do that? You think that's okay? Of course, I knew it wasn't okay. I knew it was not okay. But I was, God, such a, like, So he takes me by the arm, gets the paddle off the wall. The paddle with the holes. And he walks me down the hall to the classroom where these kids meet. And he walks and just interrupts class and says, I have something we need to deal with, and we're going to deal with it right here. And he walked me over and stood me in front of that kid's desk and said, I understand that he said some things to you that were incredibly unkind, that were way out of place. Is that true? And he nodded his head. And he said, well, do you think we need to do something about that? And he kind of shrugged his shoulders and he looked at me and I just started apologizing. I'm so sorry. I tried to say I didn't mean it and I meant I didn't mean it, but I was motivated. I just didn't know how to explain myself, but I just said I was sorry. And then Mr. Kelly had me put my hands flat on that kid's desk and bend over, which is the position in which one would get paddled should one get paddled. And he put me on this kid's desk, hands flat on the desk, and said to this kid, and here's the thing is, I cannot remember this kid's name to save my life, but I will never forget his face because it was right here, like right next to me. And Mr. Kelly said to him, I think he needs to be paddled. I think he needs to be punished for what he said to you, and I'm going to do it right here so you can understand that I take this seriously, and I'm going to mete out this punishment unless you think that that's not necessary. Do you think I need to paddle him right now? And this kid, whom I had insulted, whom I denigrated, man, he looked at me and I looked at him and he said, no, I don't think I don't think he needs that. It's okay. He doesn't need that. And he like mercy. That's mercy. I deserved all the whoopings that day. I deserved every single whooping. And he probably knew that I would go home and the principal would call home and all the things and I would be in trouble regardless. But that kid had the chance to get vengeance right there, to have it played out right in front of him. Yeah, you're going to get yours. And he chose mercy. And I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it as long as I live. That in a moment where I had wronged somebody, being stupid, making a grave error, and insulting and degrading someone because of who their immutable properties, right? Who they are. He gave me mercy. And I will go to my grave indebted to that kid. I have no idea where he is. I have no idea I mean, if he was here today, I would hug him and thank him profusely. I would just tell him that he has no idea the impact he's carried with me through my life. And I say that not just to say, hey, all you people of color, all you black people, you just need to be merciful. Just let it go. I'm not saying that. But I will say this. Justice and vengeance aren't the same thing. And mercy goes a long way when it brings us to the table. When it enables us to move toward the table and toward one another, then it's necessary and it's a good thing. And I just want to make sure that you understand, like, that I was a kid, a child doing a dumb thing, motivated by things that I couldn't even understand until I was an adult. But some people, I feel like they would hear that and go, yep, that's because you're racist. I would look at you and say, no, I'm not. And this is what I understand about like growing up in the Bay Area. When I called one of my friends, I messaged actually one of my friends, I was saying, are we just weird? Are we weird in that we had this group of friends growing up that literally looked as different as night and day all the way around the circle of friends? It was just everybody and anybody. And that's who we were, and that's who we hung out with, and that's who we spent time with families with, and that's who we had dinners with and slept at their houses and all of these things, and it didn't matter. And so my perspective on racism is that it is absolutely hideous. It absolutely exists. It's absolutely idiocy, ignorance. And yet at the same time, it's such a form. Like, how do you get there? How do you get there? Because I cannot understand that part. I can't understand how you get there. I understand how an 8-year-old kid desperate for someone's acceptance and approval gets there. But I don't understand how as an adult, as a grown person, you get there. Again, I'm not going to say that it doesn't exist, because that's a lie. Racism exists. I've seen it. I have lived in places. I've seen it firsthand. I've experienced the I don't even know how to describe it. Just the are you kidding me moments of like, you really said, I mean, I said in the video last night, I'll say it again. When I went to Kentucky, I felt like the white kid from Sunshine from Remember the Titans. I felt like him when I went to Kentucky. You know, with that scene there, he's like, hey, let's get some dinner. It's on me. We're going to go in this restaurant. And they're like, no, Sunshine, this Virginia. It doesn't work that way. And he's like, no, that's all behind us. And that's just done. And that's just, man, come on. We're all getting along. Now, it wasn't to the degree that they experienced and Remember the Titans. But I will say this. I was stunned at some of the things that people said when I was like trying to rent a house, set up my utilities. I had to have a lawyer at one point. And I was like, I got a racist lawyer. Weird. I just couldn't quite fathom how it worked and how you get there. So I know it's out there. But here's the thing. Most white people that I know, right? Most people that look like me, they want to be allies. Most people that I see, that I hear, that I know, that are on social media, like want to be allies. My wife and I want to be allies. We've been discussing this all week. Like, what's the best way? Well, I guess I use my tiny platform to say some things, and hopefully it makes some sort of difference or some sort of impact, or at least gets it out there, and we can continue to work forward. But here's the thing. Even though we can want to be allies, and we can want to, we recognize, not want to recognize, we do recognize injustice, and we want to call it what it is and speak out. I'm going to say this, and I hope that we can be heard. Because sitting here in my position and watching it just continue to be this polarizing issue, not even so much black and white, but again, here we are politicizing a thing that has no business being politicized, right? So suddenly now it's a political issue, left versus right, conservative versus liberal, right? It's like, what are we, like, how on earth? And depending on who you listen to, and I have a broad sphere of inputs across, like a lot of Twitter, like YouTube channels I follow, even some Instagrams and Instagram stories, and then my wife, helps. Just so I get a lot of voices. But I will say this. We have to sit down and man, we have to face some hard truths. That's both sides. That's everybody coming to the table. And again, I'll go back to my caveat. I realize I'm a white guy saying this, and I'm going to hopefully address this in a way that makes the most sense possible to as many people as will listen and as many people as will hear, because this is this is like the important part. We have to move forward, and the only way we're going to do that is we hear hard truths that we process and come down and sit down together and have hard discussions about how this looks going forward, because I hope this will all come together and make sense to you. Here's the first thing I believe. We cannot paint with broad brushes, because then we miss the details. We can't paint with broad brushes because then we miss the details. We miss who people are, how they think, how they feel. If you are on one side and you say, well, all black people, then you've already lost. Then you've already missed everything, and you're losing ground. You're not solving anything, nothing. All the protesters, you're missing out. All white people, when we paint with broad brushes, we miss details. And when we begin to sit down thinking we understand other people already, then there's no way to learn and listen. If I sit down at the table and look at the person across from me and I say, I already got you figured out because of, I don't know you, but I know you enough. But do you? I don't know you, but I know you enough will never work. And when we sit down and we think we've understood another person completely, we will never learn another thing about them. So we can never say that all is, all are. We just need to remove that from our vocabulary. Period. There is no all, because everyone is different. And I guarantee you, I'm going to say this emphatically, I think there are more people like me that are trying to figure out how to use their voice and what to say, when to say it, where it's appropriate, and they're also probably surrounded by people just like them, all trying to figure out, how can I get involved? How can I make my voice heard? And this is we have to be prepared to listen to one another. When we come to the table, we got to stop painting with broad brushes. Right? Because of the color of my skin, I am not a racist. Right? But there are those out there that would say, and I'm talking about people that are both white and black, would look at me and say, no, because you're white, you're immutably racist. It's imbued in your soul. It's part of your DNA. And I'm like, that is a load of crap. That's a load of crap. And here's why I think that. And I'm going to say this emphatically. You can hear this, and hopefully you can hear this. When you make something an immutable property, right? When it's DNA driven, you can't fix it with new habits and change. You can't. I had a friend. He had in his DNA a propensity toward high cholesterol, and he was as fit as he could be. He rode his bike, he ran, he did triathlons, did all these things, but he still had to take medication to fix his freaking high cholesterol because he had a propensity through his DNA toward that. When you have a DNA issue, it just can't be fixed by behaviors, and you make it unfixable, then it's never removable. And then it's always the issue. You could always sit and point at it. So when we make things an immutable property of other people, right? An accusation is, that's just who you are because of some sort of other, that's just who you are because you're white, because you're black, because you're Hispanic. That's just insane. It allows for no change, no progression when we get to that point. When we make something that deep and rooted in because we assume, then we've already lost the fight. And there is no change. So, I'm going to say this. Here's these hard truths, right? Can't paint with broad brushes. We got to be willing to sit down at the table, hear and listen. That's both sides. Both sides got to talk, right? We can't have this nonsense where I've heard you know what? You need to make sure you're listening to the right, and this is what I know, the correct voices of people of color. Well, who? Well, I'm not going to help you. You got Google. We're having a discussion. Google's not part of a discussion. Who do you think is important that I listen to? I mean, I could tell you who I listen to and then go away, but I do listen to and have spheres of influence that contain many people of color. That is Hispanics, that is blacks, that is Asians, that is a myriad of color. But what does that mean to you if you think certain voices, but you won't tell me? Right? How do I learn then? How can I be the student if the teacher's no, you got to go get on Google? If my teachers did that to my kids at school, I'd be why are we sending you to school then? You can just sit at home and be on Google. Why do you need teachers? Why do they need jobs? Just defund the whole thing. Let's move on. It's a total side note. Trying to stay focused here, people. So, broad brushes, all of that. Here's the thing. We need better messaging. And I'm telling you, this is for the people whom I love and respect, that are people of color, right? This is the black people I respect and listen to. This is the Hispanic people I respect and listen to. Like, hey y'all, please, everybody, please, we need better messaging. We need better messaging. There are many people out here who want to be allies, but are lost in the confusion and the mix-up. But we need better messaging, because what I hear is do speak, don't speak. When to speak, what to speak. Do all this work before you speak. Are you in a position to speak? We're not sure, and it's like no one knows how. And I'm like, we have to understand what it like. Yes or no? It's simple as that. Yes, no, speak. And we're going to have to understand when we speak. Sometimes we may misspeak. Sometimes it will be messy, but we're on your side. We want to see things change and get better. We want to see holistically us as a people grow together. But we need to know, like, it's got to be clear across the board, because it varies. I listen to some people like, man, if you're white and have any kind of platform, you need to be saying something all the time. I agree with that. But then I read something else, like, no, unless you do some really true anti-racist work in your own heart, then until you do that, then you can speak. And I'm like, but what if you're not racist? Like, do I need to do that work first still? Or can I just start condemning racism? Is it okay if I go and say racism bad, racism ignorance, racism is idiocy? That's like, I'm there. I want to go there, like right now. Let's stop it all. So, right, here's the thing. The next piece is this. This is for the people, right? The white people that may be listening. And maybe I'm going to lean first. I'm going to lean to the conservative side of people that I know, that I love. I realize that there's a difference, and we need to understand. We need better understanding. Okay. We need better understanding. If I'm going to sit here and say that, hey, to the black leaders, black influencers, people of color who are have platforms that are saying these things, hey, we need better solidarity in what's like. How can we help? Like, streamline that, because like in the middle of all this, we want to help, and the better the direction, the like more clarifying than good. But at the same time, on the flip side of this, right, for the people who are not people of color, we need better understanding. Let me say code word. We need better compassion. We need a better balance of understanding the difference of what it is like majority, minority feelings. And here's the thing. To my conservative friends, y'all love your stats, right? You got stats for your ass. You got them. Stats. All the time with your facts and your figures, and I get it. I'm a data junkie. I love it. But at the same time, if that's your go-to when people are talking about something that's going on, well, factually speaking, dude, stuff it. It's not helpful. Sit down, listen with compassionate ears about what people are feeling, because you can be like, right, and I get like some of you like, you love Ben Shapiro, and Ben Shapiro's famous for saying, and all the people over there at Daily Wire and Turning Point, and I don't dislike them, but sometimes they get caught up in this thing where like, well, facts don't care about your feelings. Well, they should. Sometimes they should. And I realize it can run rampant, and if you let go of facts, then it's just aimless wandering. But your facts don't help in the midst of what actually people experience. And when they experience things and you try to diminish it by facts, then you are really by default saying, I don't value your emotions, your humanity, or your experience as a person. There's such thing as anecdotal evidence, right? That's experiential evidence. And it's not to be disbelieved, it's life experience. Now, it doesn't trump all things either. So that's the other side of this. Hey, to my liberal people that I know and love and respect, like, you guys got to ease up off the heightened emotion about how, like, it's just this pervasive, racist, all cops bad, systemic, blah, like, and just shouting and yelling and running around. There's a problem. That's not going to solve anything either. So leaning heavily on your stats and your facts and pointing out your data isn't going to help by itself, nor is screaming emotionally about the problems that we're facing and just, blah, we're not going to fix it. We need to come together, hear and listen. There are facts that point out that maybe, you know what, there are things that we need to address And here's what I see. Like, we have to understand this. When we're talking stats versus emotions, right? When you stats, people have to understand that when you're a 13% minority in this country, like 13, 14%, that's what the last census told us. The black community is 13% of our nation. We, as the white people, are 70% of the nation, 70%. And I have seen people with the audacity to say somehow it's not up to us to lead. We have more people. It's up to us to lead. We're the bigger group. That's the way it works. We got to lead. You can't just walk away from that like dismissively. Well, I don't know, who says? We have more people. It's up to us. We got to set things right. When you're looking at a 13% minority, here's the deal. If you're a 13% minority looking at a 70% majority of people you think have a system that is slanted in their favor, even the slightest slant looks monumental. It looks massive. Think about this. If you had a tall hill, but suddenly you slanted that hill upwards, that hill looks enormous. It's that much bigger. You got to think about that. That's the reality of what people are looking at. That's what they see. Now, not everyone has time to sit and research and do the facts and all those things. And you can easily throw it out there, and that's fine. But we have to do that with compassion and with resolution in mind. So that means that when we see racism, when we see injustice, when we see things that are out of place for people that are a minority, it's up to the majority to go, we're looking out for these people. We're looking out for them. We're looking out. And when you have a proven track record of looking out for people that are the smaller group, right? And you're the bigger group and you have the proven record of doing that, then suddenly all your facts and figures fall into line and they make sense and they make more impact. And they're like, yeah, no, we're doing good. We are doing better. And I understand and I fully believe, like from my life, from birth to now, it has definitely gotten better. And there's no denying that, but it doesn't mean it's been eradicated. And I believe this is something that we can eventually eradicate if we just as a society stand up and say this is foolish, ignorant, idiot behavior and we won't tolerate it. And you push it so far into the fringes that it just goes away. And maybe it'll never go away, but it'll be so fringy that it'll be just like, yeah, no, you got to understand, like humanity is humanity. And these things need to bring us to the table, not push us away from one another. And in the same way, I would never point at a black person and say, because you're black, I believe this, this, and this about you just because you're black. I would expect that no black person should be able to look at me and say, hey, you're white, so this, this, and this is who you are. Because we should both know that when we come, we should both know that's just foolish. And that will never allow us to learn and grow about one another. Now, I can get all the ideas, and this is where I went wrong last night. So I'm going to start backing down, and I'm going to start landing this thing. Because I think this is imperative. That these hard truths and open ears, they make us better people. Hard truths and open ears make us better people. We have seen a lot of pain and anger this last week, right? And I'm not going to have any links this week in my description below. Other than the social media stuff. Sorry, social media links will be down there, but I'm not going to have any links to no videos, no research I've done because I mean, either what I described to you as far as my experience that happened in the Stone Ages before there were phones and personal recorders. I mean, we had phones, but I think we got a push button phone when I finally hit like fourth grade. It was awesome. Or, everything else that's going on, man, it's just out there. It's like staring you in the face. And if you haven't seen it, I'm amazed. Actually, I'm pretty impressed that you've been able to avoid all of this for the last week. All that said, I want to see us come to the. I'm just so tired of like people who are progressive thinking they have some sort of like moral high ground on the race issue and condemning like all conservatives as racist haters. And then I hate the idea that conservatives just stand out there and they just look at liberals and go, you're just race baiting. And we have these facts and figures and we have emotion and we care. And it's like, yeah, but you need both to make this actually work. And God, if we're not honest enough to say that, then we're just doomed to fail. If we're not honest enough to say that we need both the statistics and the good news of where we can see improvements, and here's the thing, I mean, I've also seen all week, and let's like come on, can we just say, like, not all cops are bad. In fact, we've seen an incredible display after display after display this week of where police have been amazing, marching with, listening to, standing with, protecting. Like, we've seen so many amazing, like, examples of where cops are marvelous. And I am a supporter of law enforcement. I believe they do a very difficult job. I believe they have a higher responsibility and obligation, and I could go into that, like the training. I was in the Army for 7 years, and I realized they have an obligation and they have responsibility. And those officers in Minneapolis, like every single one of them needs to be arrested and charged, right? Third-degree murder and accessories, all of them, all the way around, because they should have been able to stop, get that man off, tell him he needs to stop, get an ambulance, get an EMT, provide care for that man as soon as they knew he was in distress. Right? If I, as someone who was a veteran, go into combat, I shoot a civilian, that civilian dies, non-combatant, I face charges. No questions. I face charges, no questions. I have to have the same accountability for police, but most police are not that guy. Most law enforcement officers are not that. Now, are there bad apples? Yes, there are bad apples in every bunch, right? There's bad actors in every group, and we could point it out all day long. What are we going to do as the good actors? To push them out and rid ourselves of them, right? To push them so far beyond where they're have any impact at all. What can we do to do that? That's what we need to do. We need to stop talking about how there are bad actors, and we need to come together to make sure we get rid of the bad actors, okay? That's what we need to do, that we need more of that kind of action. So, with that in mind, right? Again, painting with broad brushes, bad. We need better messaging. We need better understanding. We need to understand, like we need better perspectives. But the biggest thing is we need to, like, in order to get that understanding, we need to empty our heads of our preconceived notions or anything we might think, to sit down at the table together so that we can have the conversations that need to happen and be willing participants in bringing healing where it needs to be brought. So, hard truths and open ears make us better people. Hard truths and open ears make us better people. I'm just going to cling to that. And I want to have those discussions. So, I am on social media. Those links will be posted in the description, in the podcast notes. You can find me out there. If you're local to Northern California and you ever want to, like we talk, I'm glad to dialogue. If you shoot me a message, if you shoot me whatever, I'm glad to dialogue with you about any of this. And you can tell me that, I don't know, like the comments are open. I don't close my comments or anything. Like feedback is welcome, whatever it is. Hard truths and open ears, better people. So, all that said, how do we come together? How do we make this better? How do we call out the idiocy and injustice where it is? How do we work to be better people? Like I say, every week, let's be better. Better in how we treat one another. Better in how we respect one another. Better in how we serve one another. Let's be better today. Let's be better tomorrow and the day after that. I'm Jay the Gray, and you have been grayed out.